All right, I think that we're ready to rock and roll. Yeah.
From the heart of the Savior, 100 days of Geshe, on the peak of the cloud, resembling a chunk of extremely white fresh bird, King of Dharma on Distant Sun. He is come here to be heard to the sun. In the sky before me, on the line from lotus and moon, my perfect pure glory smiles with delight. Supreme God of merit on my mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons of great teaching. The holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your Holy Spirit is an excellent explanation, is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is friendly to you, with glory renowned to you, for meaningful to see, hear, and remember. I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, such as waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtues of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three powers, that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strive for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and made your freedoms and existences meaningful. By abandoning the eight worldly concerns, Saviour, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy Guru, from the glowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the skies of Dhamma, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma on the receptacle for those to be subdued, exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigrated beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losantra, the teachings to shine forever. Saji Purgishu Me Totram, Viramin Chin Party, Sange Chin Chin Kovadi, Jogunanda Chinochoba. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lamrim and his two sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one Losantra, who had the morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of the two stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. For the force of having requested in this way, other beings of white light omitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the colour of milk, flows from the opening of the tree of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, and obscurations, and with imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So then, page 13, the 5-line midsummer, we'll recite 3 times. Nigme se vete chenre si, jingme kembe hobo jangaya, tofu vare chanse samveta, kanche kipe su gen sampapa, losan trabe shabla sovate. Nigme se vete chenre si, jingme kembe hobo jangaya, tofu vare chanse samveta, kanche kipe su gen sampapa. Losantra Vishaka Sovate, Nime Seve Chenre Si, Jime Kembe Wampo Zangrayam, Jepomare Chanse Samveta, Kanchen Kebe Tsungen Songkapa, Losantra Vishaka Sovate. Sangye Jagan Sangye Chanamba Chanchuba Devani Kapsechi Dagi Chusungye Betsonangi Dola Benche Sangye Dola Shu Sangye Jagan Sangye Chanamba Chanchuba Devani Kapsechi Dagi Chusungye Betsonangi Dola Benche Sangye Dola Shu Sangye Chodan Sozi Chonamba Chancho Bade Dani Kasachi
Good morning. Lamrim, Jingi.
We're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's middling presentation of the states of the path of enlightenment, and we've been looking for the last couple of sessions at the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. So it's a complete topic, and it might be that, it is possible that some of you have had it before in its entirety, but also it is possible that some of you have had some of it, in the sense that we've been covering this topic over a few sessions. So if you missed previous sessions and you listen to parts that come later on at the end of the explanation of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, it might be difficult to contextualize everything. In some sense, it might seem as if when we rely upon a spiritual teacher, then we submit to the spiritual teacher as if we're making the spiritual teacher abuse us or bully us or what have you. So you could have kind of this wrong impression if you don't get the whole set of teaching of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. Okay. Shinakura. So one essential part for looking at in the teaching on the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher is dealing with the benefits of relying upon a spiritual teacher and the drawbacks of not doing so. So if you only look at the drawbacks of relying upon a spiritual teacher and miss out on the benefit, indeed, it'd be easy to put it in the right context. It seems that you might get a wrong understanding, like thinking that, for example, here Lama Tsongkhapa is trying to instill some fear in our heart if we don't rely upon a spiritual teacher. So it's good to look at it as a complete, comprehensive set of teaching rather than looking at just some bits or some points out of this explanation, because it's easy to go wrong sometimes. And in teaching this section, Lama Tsongkhapa draws from sources, from sutras and tantras, from mantras. It's not that Lama Tsongkhapa has made up these points by himself. He actually kind of has sources to back up his presentation of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. So it's not that here we just think that Lama Tsongkhapa is instilling fear in our heart or is creating a sense of terror if we don't rely upon a spiritual teacher. It's not his own creation. It is backed up by scripture.
Lamrim Jing 아니 그게 예시 제발 때니 조 가르친 거도 나오니 아니 니 공부 용수 받지 상기 공부이 맞지 로 아니 상기 까이 맞지 아니 신고했지 개체수로 먼저 상기 진주 속 람람 따위 고대되지 상기 파샤니 아니 람중가 받지 원래 초대의 소리 통발나 아니 자원이 지겨 말았어 아니 제롬이 강송 받지 상기 공부 세우 또야 체 상기 강송 받지 먼저에 원트야 체도 송바인자 아니 디니 강송 받지 상기 공부이 받지 아니 또 두고 그러더라.
So look at this presentation as a presentation that explains in a complete sense the intention of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha. So Lama Tsongkhapa gives here a set of teachings on the graduated path to enlightenment, and those teachings are the teachings of the Buddha. It's important to keep that in mind because sometimes we, in some sense, it could happen that we completely ignore the Buddha or put the Buddha aside, and we think that for me the master is Lama Tsongkhapa. But Lama Tsongkhapa here is giving a presentation of the steps of the path to enlightenment in drawing from the teachings of the Buddha. So it's not that this is something that Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa has created himself. This is the complete intention of the Buddha.
단다 아니 롱젠 난고야 그거 쪼디야 아니 콩도 열었어 비지 아니 켈렘면 잠마임 봐콩 딘딘딘지 산지 딘딘지 송샤 도세 콩도 열었어 이 디시바이나 아니 강송바디 아니 산지 공바임 바디 좀된디 공바임 바디 아니 로로 코르도 열었어.
And for that reason, we also have scriptural citations that are interwoven into Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation. So it's not that we just take Lama Tsongkhapa's word just because it said so. We also have references to scriptures, to teachings that the Buddha gave in order to show that here Lama Tsongkhapa is giving us a presentation of what the Buddha said. So it's important also to make sure that not only we accept those teachings just because Lama Tsongkhapa said so, but we also look at the scriptural citation, make sure that whatever we take on can be traced back to teachings of the Buddha.
꺄르 야지용야 디 안뒤 연댕이 피기게 가르 소주게 곰냠네 가르치 여바 디 이자와디 꺄르 투여라스 딘자 당한 두스 람룸 친이 지용디 람룸 디 우송이 디 아니 장고노 중가 치고 콩이나양 아니 타투사디 아니 산길에 투치니 간주 람룸 두스 때바데 때니 아니 산길에야 아니 샘다 니를 줘야 산길에 대버치를 줘야지 마송바이나 아니 지 라마 랭가와 지고지려야 니 코랑 이 상상으로 지 대대바이나 아니 꺄비 콘조송다 지 타가림부 소르지 서로 있는 뺏어서 상도 상상하는 데지 가서 다지 남도도 연구하면서 디지 라고였어.
And for that, the most important thing to begin with is refuge, which is creating the basis, creating the root for whatever we do in Buddhist tradition. So whatever we do based on this root, the final root, which is going for refuge. So we want to make sure that we form a good way of going for refuge. So whatever we do, whatever meditation practice we undertake, whatever other practices we do, all those practices hinge on, first of all, going for refuge. This is the basis of those of our practices. So then when we look at sets of teachings such as this that was composed by Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa, if we take those teachings to be only Lama Tsongkhapa's teaching, and not think about them as teaching of the Buddha, there would be in a heart a gap that would be created between ourselves and the Buddha. But through those teachings, we want to, in our heart, draw nearer and nearer to the Buddha. We want to find greater and greater trust and faith in the Buddha. If we think of this text such as this, Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment, and think about it that this is Lama Tsongkhapa's teaching. Not in relation to what the Buddha taught, but just in isolation to what Lama Tsongkhapa has said. And we don't really make sure that we see that those teachings are actually Buddha's. There's a danger, Geshe feels, that in our heart there would also be a gap that will be created between ourselves and the objects of refuge, the three objects of refuge. We'll draw further and further away from that, and that would be really unfortunate. So Geshe said that he thought that this is an important point to make. Sometimes he kind of has all sorts of thoughts or ideas. Maybe some of them are in line with reality, some of them might not be in line with reality. But if we don't make sure that teachings that we look at, text and so forth, such as this one, Lama Tsongkhapa's text, if we don't make sure that we contextualize them in the right way and say that there are Buddha's teachings, it might undermine the way of going for refuge.
Tireda nganzu lama tsachimu chegoya gyunsen zo di ani sangi tsachimu za sangi di nganzu kyab thatuba kyawil thatuba dujat thatuba di ani sangi nyar chikchagoyanza ani lama tsachimu sogoya di tel tu yores ro ta karchin lama tsachimu chagres lamdi nganzu dujat thatuba di sangi khomban di ani sangi kosun tugi ani chenlab gi tobgi ani nganzu sangi salaya drogo hech mato shemba yo marwas di chenlab juksa gota masuna lamga chi yoba di lami gyuni yongo ganza lama tsachimu chagores izanga dilji chishimi thone ani lami nenju kom inare ani lamrum nyamne chewa inare lama tensu kolaya ani sangu tawa ina diris ro ta tuksa ro del tugu dos.
So we regard the teacher, the Lama, as being very important, very precious. Also the Buddha we regard as being very precious. We regard both the teacher and the Buddha as being very dear to our heart because in terms of what we seek to attain, in terms of our final refuge, in terms of our final object of accomplishment, it is the state of Buddha. We ourselves want to reach the level of Buddhahood. And for that, the Lama is important. The Lama is important because in order to proceed along the path that leads to the state of Buddha, we need to receive the blessings of body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. And the blessings are transmitted or they come to us through the Lamas. So for that end, we do different practices. We have, for example, practices of Kuru Yoga, or in this set of teaching, the steps of the path of enlightenment, we come across the part of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. This is why those practices and sections are important.
Dinza nganzolaya sangi kosontu chelabdi lunga yeso jusa kodi lama yinza and lama tenkures. Kedzi lama madembaina and did hamje logi and got gardo yinza. Di gonga vaina teni nganzu lunga yisula ya ani chadang monsong gi shawan kyoji ma do begi ani giwi gi lo yong ya meba inza chadang monsong gi ton teni ni nyeba gi kendo du said nganzu gi kendo du said o dindi chag do tinza ani tembi goba di ani tanda di nganzu tsingsam dia and daran le gore sanji kombang nyeba jawanam geba shibadirenda
No.
jawanam geba ani gewi singi gi mokwa ngandro motonwa lengemba de nyumu bituba kawa chansan gi choba de mangashi tela themba de dembi yonde gi sogi chendo gyoshi negal de thadu gi tentam jin jobar somba tangs dirda.
So the Lama is you could say that the Lama is the gateway for the blessings of body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. Through the Lama, we engage those blessings of body, speech, and mind And it depends upon that we can traverse the states of the path. So if we close the gate, if we close the door for the blessings of body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, we will not be able to engage them. And we still find that our actions of body, speech, and mind are governed by afflictive states of mind, by anger, attachment, and so forth. And as such, they will lead us to miserable states of existence only. To our mind being controlled by anger, attachment, and so forth, without engaging the blessings of the Buddha, when the gateway is closed, we will not be able, on our own account, on accord, to reach this state of Buddhahood. And for that reason, it is important to rely upon a spiritual teacher. And this is the point that Lama Tsongkhapa makes in his presentation. So let's look at the benefits of relying upon a spiritual teacher. It says in page 25, the advantages of reliance. First of all, we'll look at benefits such as approaching the state of the Buddha. It says in the scriptures that you will approach the state of Buddha, that the victors will rejoice, that you will not be deprived of virtuous friends, that you will not fall into the lower realms or into lower rebirths, and that you will not easily succumb to bad karma and afflictions, since you will not transgress the conduct of bodhisattvas, remaining mindful of it. The accumulation of excellent qualities will grow higher and higher, and all your temporary and ultimate goals will be accomplished.
미시비 몸바 세월 때니 차당 도고요리 차당 도발 때니 아니 차당 제부 아니 가서 따지 응앙송 아니 계야로 소바 아니 동아 빠드는 걸 정하고 소바 대탐제로 도신 도고도스 이제 탐제 비다 기비신이라 라리 데바디 딜리스 차고레스라.
So the spiritual teacher is that which is the person who teaches you what needs to be taken up and what needs to be cast aside. It is the one that gives you the understanding of all the points that you need to practice, and through that you develop knowledge that assists you in overcoming afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and so forth. If you overcome your ignorance of unknowingness, you'll be able to turn you back on afflictive states of mind. And if you do that, you'll also be able to turn you back to miserable states of existence and the suffering within those states of existence. And this is what Lama Tsongkhapa says here when he refers to the benefits of relying upon a spiritual teacher.
Shuna digido samsung ro di nganzu yongtu yo maras nganzu ni khaso ta kawa member senamudu ngada ngada kawa member wangi ani sanjingu sujit jegi sonum yo maras ro ani sanjingu sheshu yo maras tana dinzada hinji sanji chenlab di lami gyune maden tamech chagdos ro.
So then, having to receive those blessings of the Buddha, the blessings of body, speech, and mind, and also considering our current situation in which we are not fortunate enough to meet the Buddha in person. At least Geshe said that personally speaking, he wasn't fortunate enough to meet the Buddha in person, and therefore those teachings, those blessings need to come from somewhere. So those blessings are coming through the spiritual teacher, through the Lama.
Odire dinza tindigi ta givishin telasegota shenya shinyin inkurwanis ngandru nyoy lenam sendila lusum neba cham zang malum de nyoy ya lede 27 giwatans lamate pay sangi pawdu neba la yompo soji gezan sigi neba soji pay shin cho sonsos.
The second point under the section of the advantages of relying upon a spiritual teacher says, furthermore, through serving and paying respect to the spiritual teacher, the karmas for experiencing the Lord rebirth is exhausted directly in this lifetime through only slight harm to body and mind, or else through experiences in dreams. It is said that there are enormous benefits that outshine the roots of virtue of making offerings and the like to innumerable Buddhas.
나반이 신인도 친이 댄줄로나스 데리다 아니 댄줄로비 님이세 댄줄로비 님이기 저당 담부 때마된디 라마라스 아니 때마된 라마 아니 댄줄 디앙 비리야 따지심주야고 제체니 아니 때 수신 댄슬 제라 따지 친댕 소리 게 아니 델로 소리 깨나 니 야구요 말에 쓰고레스 라.
The next point in the text explains the disadvantages of not relying properly on a spiritual teacher. So first of all, relying upon a spiritual teacher or deciding not to do it is totally up to us. It's our decision. Not only that, checking out what needs to be done in order to rely upon a spiritual teacher. How do you rely upon a spiritual teacher properly? And what is an incorrect or inappropriate way of relying upon a spiritual teacher is something that we need to investigate before we rely upon a spiritual teacher. But then once we have assessed a person, once we're decided that we're going to rely upon that spiritual teacher, we need to make sure that our way of relying upon the person does not go wrong. That, for example, non-faith and so forth are not generated.
신인도 친이 댄줄로나 셀레 내다 된 투미 세와상 치만 남주 동아 빠드네 봐 요원 겨데 납치발에 나면 회변 다기니 군도 sem중 미자데 가디몽베 체기나 냐왕이 봐 체버겨 남메 라손 지그롱위 냐와템 봐 칸이 봐 회변라는 회변노 되는 네버 양다시 제당스 자나기 간전도 참발레 짱 치치치 좀 년발라 강기 라만 면접 받기 기와 자기니 메시지인데 기원 그 시송소 제연데 마기반 메기라 개반는 냠는 조시 미기위 신인데 비롯된 용데 집진 캠페인이 문제 받기에 넘버 탐주 방을 차고 송소스.
We looked at the advantages of relying upon a spiritual teacher. Then when we look at the disadvantages of not relying properly on a spiritual teacher, it begins with point A, the way it ruins this life and future ones. If you take someone as a spiritual teacher and then back off in your reliance upon them, a lot of illness and evil spirits will cause harm in this life, and in future lives you will have to experience the innumerable or immeasurable sufferings of the Lord rebirth. Just as it is said in the 50 verses of Guru Devotion, never agitate the minds of your masters, not at all. If you do so because of confusion, you will surely roast in hell. It was explained authentically that all those who disparage the masters are going to dwell in horrific hells that were taught like the incessant one. In a passage from the commentary on difficult points of the black opponents of Yama, it also says, whoever hears a single verse and does not apprehend the Guru will be born amongst dogs 100 times and then as someone of low caste. It continues in saying in point B, apart from that, excellent qualities that have not arisen do not arise, and those that have arisen deteriorate and vanish. Moreover, it says if you rely on non-virtuous friends and bad companions, your excellent qualities will also diminish, your faults will increase, and there will be undesirable results. Therefore, it was taught that this should be avoided in every way.
대다 두 번이스 대들라민는 주시 용수탑이 담바양 할시아버들 고귀기 미번 투리 점기 메절라 흰 타번의 취식 전에는 만노와 티비 신인집에 유린 땡고라스 저 당간줄레 담보가 나당가 자와지 에니치 균딩 그피리야 아니 칭인기 신인 삼부직 메나 겨 토마메 콤디비 차당로 디왕기 아니 람 신줄로라야 로야기 빼년가 친구 연자 아니 비게 만노 칭인기 기위신인지라야 유림부 땡치네 아니 교송공소 최고레스 락디송다스
The sixth point in the presentation of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher provides a summary of the meaning of the points that we've covered up until now. We begin with, first of all, the importance of proper reliance on the root of what you have always aspired for. It says, that being so, the instructions widely known as Guru Yoga should also be understood according to what has been explained before. It will not be enough to do the visualization in just one meditation session, though. When you do one Dhamma practice from the bottom of your heart, you should long rely on a spiritual teacher who guides you unmistakably. So this advice is particularly important for beginners. It is important to rely upon a spiritual teacher over time, over a long time. After all, we have been under the influence of anger, attachment, and so forth since time without beginning and up until now. And therefore, there is a danger of following erroneous paths. In order to avoid following or traversing through paths that are incorrect, we need to rely upon a spiritual teacher that will teach us how to follow the correct path. Not only that, we need to do it over a long time, to continuously rely upon a spiritual teacher so that we'll be able to apply the instructions in our study, reflection, and meditation.
and lama sunguyores inaya pigi ganzuchi and should be sabr drondi and lamin enjotian sabr drogdos sondandi.
So it says, this being so at the beginning of this section, this being so, the instructions widely known as Guru Yoga should also be understood according to what has been explained before. So such instructions are found across the presentation of the steps of the path that are shared with the steps of the path of the three scopes being, beginning with the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher from the point of view of the Vinaya. Even in the Vinaya, there is a topic of relying upon a spiritual teacher. But then when you get to a higher levels in your progression along the steps of the path, then the teachings and your practice become more and more profound, deeper and deeper. Also, the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher goes deeper and deeper. So just to illustrate that, when you take vows according to the tradition of the Vinaya, the Lama is the one that gives you the vow. You take the vows from the Lama, and as such, you consider the Lama as being someone that is representing the Buddha. It's like an ambassador of the Buddha or someone that represents the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. And as such, you view then the Lama gives you the vow to be as kind as the Buddha. Then when you follow a spiritual teacher, a Lama that teaches you the scriptural collection of the Bodhisattva, then you regard the spiritual teacher as Buddha, like a Buddha. And when you follow the Tantra system, the Tantric system, the secret mantra, you develop the mental attitude seeing the Lama as being a Buddha in actuality, a real Buddha.
Terediza penada nyamnen tarduba ta nyamnen se toshudi ani sanga doji tebi nyamnen chongdi ani lamin nenjodi ani tun truleya gegodas ro tun tru chame jine ani lamin nenjo kyang ani di tone nyamnen jogodas ro.
So then in terms of the final practice of Guru Yoga, we take up practices such as the 6-session Guru Yoga, in which 6 times during the day we undertake the practice of Guru Yoga.
Terediza tian jidangi lamin nenjo ki kejuchi res pigileya ani sozu sosale deni ani tun truleya lama ani semleya gongya dia res inaya dachi ani kecheshu di lammanno rotengi shenjilaya teni ani nyasum gonsum sujin cheba di de lagaji laminenju yomarista sungudasra.
So this is one feature of doing a Guru Yoga practice, such as the one that you do within the 6-session Guru Yoga, in which you develop a certain consideration of the Guru, of the spiritual teacher. But still, the most important point is to follow the spiritual teacher in terms of the teachings that they give you and the way that they lead you along the steps of the path with the instructions. As it says here, it will not be enough to do the visualization in just one meditation session. When you do one Dhamma practice from the bottom of your heart, you should have long relied on a spiritual teacher who guides you unmistakably.
This seance chegawi shangani lama tendo zana pando yongsun batar tensu mashinani kemeba kyongjongyi shenyin tembi chogon denam kahane jang kechawa nedengim dumi savarnangos.
So this paragraph continues in saying, as Chekawa also said about that time, when you rely on a guru, there will be doubtful questions whether to give up. Accordingly, since there will only be loss without profit if you do not know how to rely upon him, it becomes evident that the cycles of teachings about relying on a spiritual teacher are more important than any other ones and the root of what you have always aspired for.
Ko mimu ragla shenyin tensu mishishi shi kyang mechebal tomala chönyen ba nawla lama tembe kana manto mamu jongshi tela yang shaba da domba soji lonjong kawe khasheba tan pheyon de nimi no shiba chedi tensu chetawashi machong nam zamba taban shashi domson lemon du chawos.
And it continues to point B, which comes under the heading of the need for confession and a vow, because it is a great fault if that proper reliance does not come about. With our cause afflictions, not knowing how to rely on a spiritual teacher, or knowing how to, but not doing so, we have often allowed many misdeeds of reliance on the guru to occur in regard to listening to the Dhamma. It is difficult for an awareness of that to develop through confession and restraint. Having understood the advantages and disadvantages as explained earlier, you should therefore sincerely confess any occurrences that are not in accordance with proper reliance and develop many strong resolves.
Tirda di pena tangan nanchu karine yang ani sozu pile ya kangrang shiva zang chedu jangi yobaina ani lama dengo ya shushu yomarwas pena chidangi ani lobjong karchi yoba chigbarwas inaya ani thomo maimba di ani nanchu jambi gi godun zo di rangi semgyun doya chedu chigiyona lama maden tameres ra lami gyune sangi gi chelab singi di semla mashubayana pigi kangrang shiva zamgi ani chadam moso doseda sem gyursedi zawani ni yomsigwa chik insares inza dindigi chedata sangi gi chelab jugu go ani lama le teni ani tensu tiya zu chik 아니 대바다 이치 쌈이 토니 아니 년성 공수 수진 제바이나 아니 디균의 산지 진력 톱 아니 간시비 뒤톱이 아니 진력 손제 토니 아니 샘교원로에치 야지야담 연구에서레스
So we study the teachings of the Buddha, and you can study the teaching of the Buddha in an academic way. And if you just study them as an academic, you don't need to rely upon a spiritual teacher. But if you want to study the teachings of the Buddha and also use them in order to transform your mind, in order to tame your mind, in order to rid yourself of anger, attachment, and so forth, which means that you're not just limited to academic knowledge, but you want to also apply that to mental transformation. For that, relying upon a spiritual teacher becomes indispensable. Otherwise, without relying upon a spiritual teacher, you will not be able to overcome your afflictive states of mind. You will not be able to tame your mind. So therefore, when you understand those points, the benefits and the disadvantages, respectively, you're training in developing trust and faith in a spiritual teacher. You properly rely upon the spiritual teacher, and through that, you receive their blessings, so that will certainly 100% certainty that will bring about mental transformation.
대달 채널 림부 못어봐 야스 따동을 신이 변수 말로 토니 들어와이나 아니 야스 따동을 신인 소유 몸 무시바 저는 노선 따버치 융그레스
And it finishes with saying, if you act in that manner, before long, you will become like the Bodhisattva Sadapuridita, as well as the youthful Shuddhana was insatiable in his quest for a spiritual teacher.
Terida ngom mishiba sedi yacha yatamba ani shinyi tenzu yak jona ani shinyi ngom mishiba chik ngom ya meba chik yacha yatamba da yungu yosarwas ra pena nandan ngus jede jawrumchi ani gonglo ta jech kyatang mabe badata gonglo nani chejan dandai na pi lama tin din lama tenchi ani menga din shugi yoras one chinada shumugo soriziniya and tandayana be and ngombame to nangadosra.
As this section says, if you act in that manner before long, you will become like the Bodhisattva Sadaprarudita, as well as the youthful Shuddhana, who was insatiable in his quest for a spiritual teacher. So becoming insatiable is something that will come about in terms of pursuing instructions, pursuing your practice, pursuing your development. It will come about through proper reliance upon a spiritual teacher. Like, for example, when we think of our teachers at the present, when you think of, for example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, studying from very young age, having started his education at around the age of 5, now being in his mid-80s, he still receives instructions. He still relies upon spiritual teachers. He still receives instructions for practice. In some sense, you said he doesn't really have to do it, but still he does it.
Terida Lamrim chinab sengi mixage yobadi chedang nyongwe matro parde ngus ratrayade khamuro redos ra pena nganzu gi pena jawro chiliya ta ngone thani deba yodi sambala pi chanju semda inji kechimuri songi son tarang thon pedi ani semlaya so mandwach ligdos dikhare ani chedang namgi chanju semda inji kechimbu yibadi sosu jang yore shingi yorde inaya tezang semlaya so meba yawro ji son de sondi mixe semlaya so yoyadi tilami chinam thon yungu yobad sewros pena nga ani gang yamdita yunmu dedi gang man chalaya ani lendre singdi ani so meba re le yundelaya so yomari ani sondi ani shoji semlaya sugu yesra chidang lendre lo meba di 로마무 쇼질이야 장르다 이내야 갱기 디송바다 소스베 쇼질이야 장데 아니디 소아드 싸우는 작음도스 디 딜라미 친다고 토네 연구열 모두 피기 지금 와동디 지부지기하러 왔어.
We emphasize the blessings of the Buddha, the blessings of a spiritual teacher in this section, but it's hard to really understand that, to describe that without having experienced that. If you have experienced receiving the blessings of the Lama, then it's easier to relate to that. Like, for example, listening to teachings that His Holiness gives. He speaks of bodhicitta in the mind of enlightenment. And Geshe said that those teachings that His Holiness gives, which really affect your heart. You feel that your heart is moved, that there's a certain feeling that is generated from His Holiness speaking about compassion and bodhicitta. So that's an example of receiving the blessings of the Lama. Or like, for example, Geshe says that having relied upon a spiritual teacher in his monastery for many years, his teacher was used to emphasize the importance of seeing karma as being unbetraying, unfailing. And although you hear that over and over again in your study program, still there's that person that really affects your heart. It's not, you've had those words before, but then when you hear it again from a certain person and it penetrates your heart and it moves your heart, that's a sign of receiving the blessings. And in order to receive such blessings, one needs to have faith. It is clear, like, for example, when you look at the teaching that His Holiness gives, He gives teachings across the world. You can say that people from all walks of life receive those teachings. Some of them have faith, and some of them haven't got faith in those teachings or His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And you can see that some of them are affected by those teachings and some of them are not affected by those teachings. So as Geshe said, his teacher used to say quite a lot that you really need to follow karma. Karma is unbetraying. After all, you still proceed from this lifetime to next lifetime. And in light of that, you do need to have a special consideration of karma. So if you have faith in a teacher that teaches you that, then it really affects your heart. You find some inspiration. It delights your heart to find it inspiring when you get such instructions. Whereas if you don't trust a certain Lama that tells you that, if you have no faith or trust in that person, you might be thinking that, yeah, of course they say that. This is their culture to say that. The person is a bit old-fashioned. So of course they say that. And in such a way, it doesn't really affect your heart.
Selling be namtari and the Jew to be Yamlendi and it's so big touchy and Masadin Mangido Lama singing bar Resungo Sare Himbe Negan Chidor Chala Kusun to Tentam Chavo Yo Major Kevin Zepersan then Devala Lut Tambor Sandi Kimonton Kidon Cheduyan Rongi Jolum Yukuni Yamdro Semke Gyodan Jengi Shivers Chas.
So we've completed the section of relying upon a spiritual teacher, and the next point in the text explains how to sustain the meditation session. So it says the condensed presentation of how to maintain it or how to sustain a meditation session. We have the actual way to maintain it and the reason why it is needed to be maintained by means of the two modes of maintaining. Let's begin with the actual way of maintaining or sustaining a meditation session. The first point is what to do during the meditation session itself, and then what to do during the periods in between sessions. When we begin with the explanation of what to do during the meditation session itself, there's first of all the preparation session, then what to do during the actual meditation, and what to do at the end of the meditation session. Now, beginning with what to do in preparation, we are looking at what is called the 6 preparatory practices that were extracted from the teachings of Lama Tsultrim. So some of you have encountered that section of the teachings that explains the 6 preparatory practices. One of the main sources for that is Lama Tsultrim, or as it says here, with respect to the first preparatory practice, which is cleaning your dwelling and setting up representations of body, speech, and mind. It says, following the biography of Survanadvipa with Lama Tsultrim, you should clean your dwelling and arrange representations of the exalted body, speech, and mind. Yeah, we'll soon. Yeah.
Sorry.
Shannon.
Yeah.
In the life story of Prince Siddhartha, it doesn't, in the common stories that I hear, it seems to be an account of him relying on a person, a lama, and Geshe just comment.
So in the last story of Prince Siddhartha, as you remember, there is like one account of him relying upon a spiritual teacher.
No, it's not really an account of him
Or reference.
spiritual teacher all the way to Buddha. And could you comment on this in relation to relying on the spiritual teacher, where Prince Siddhartha doesn't appear to do so?
All right, so you say that Prince Siddhartha doesn't seem to be doing so. Okay. Dila sange shagetu pa sange machakona. What is that? Sorry. Sange shagetu pa sange machakona the tambo gesek portana shudu ani digital rapid jungle capsule yan namtan de tema inarwa gewa shenyen tenso de sewo shida to indosa dila sange shagatu pa sange machakona sange kopa matokona gewa shenyen de daran tensu tengi logyu den do chi yore shitsu chi yore
Yore was ra yore steady ra inaya karsa tambo pigi ta kanji kerab namu tewaina tangi dinima chigdeni samayuma ani sanji kerab namu tewaina ta chig ani kewa mambu shu yuni ani sosa drjanchi ani to swing yours. They the big Geshe come to Tagaranaya and Sanji Korangi non Tiltinolaya then Niji Uta Niji Chechili and a Kaswataji or Dindiji Kirkdos.
Nige Utanisna.
Suzuta Susutopchi.
When you look at the more extensive explanation or biographies of the Buddha, such as, for example, the ones found in the Garland of Birth stories, the Jakarta tales. There you find stories from previous lifetimes of the Buddha, and Geshe reckons that in them you find a few points in which the Buddha did rely upon spiritual teachers. But then there was his final life. And indeed in those final life, he says that, for example, when he came forward, in the sense that when he became renounced, he himself was the one who cut his tuft of hair. So normally it is done by someone else. But in this life story, it said that he was the one who was doing it.
Tijiri, Jidani, Sanji Shajatobo Korangi, Niman Holangi Negos, Karichi, Medi, 초직리스 이내양 쪼디 아니 간주 템비 다보 아니 템보 코란랑기 아니 니 추출디 경경 체월이야 아니 라말 덴 로고서디 템보 코란랑기 까르와스 랑간주 델 두고라스타 라 코란기 마오바 아니 나 living 유수수 쭈치니 아니 캐란솔이야 펜도치그리스 딘자 캐란솔기 따지 아니 니 아니 그 송송습다고 아니 레벨이야 아니 배 나나신기 따지 유시샤치니 아니 제바이나 아니 니 지나 비켜나줄래 죽으리스 디 산지 공부 탈도 디레도스.
So then there's a commonly renowned history of the Buddha. And such, there are certain accounts. The account of relying upon a spiritual teacher might not appear in a really clear way. But still, having attained a state of enlightenment, the Buddha said that, I have relied upon a spiritual teacher, and this is the proper way of relying upon a spiritual teacher. But not only that, in the future, I shall appear to you as a master. And through that, I will teach you what you need to do in the stages of your practice. So in the future, in me appearing as a spiritual teacher, that is a proper way of relying upon a spiritual teacher. So we don't have the opportunity to look at the life story, the Jakarta tells, but that is a very extensive explanation of all the different events within the lifetimes of the Buddha.
Sanji Koran Rabdi Chongya any Rangjung Togi, any Rabdi Chongyares. Hina Sanji Jinju Tsogi, any Sanji Rangjung Togi, any Rabdi Chongshanga, the Chigi Slavna, Domat Togo Mares. Living language. So when you look at those life stories, you see you get a sense that there are some things that the Buddha did by himself, which you could say that they have occurred by themselves or by the Buddha, which others cannot do. Like, for example, the Buddha became ordained by himself, came forward by himself. So then, if we think that since the Buddha did that by himself, I'm also allowed to do it. I'm also allowed to have a vow without relying upon the master. Well, the Buddha did that, but it's not the same case for us. Tanda Jerumji Lamrim Chimbi, Tandon Chimbi Nomalaya, Tavi Kursiondi, Lord teachers chamber chow sage. Ra, Sonyers, Dinan Shingi, any Nanzugi, Lamrim Jami Kalaya, any Lord D. Pigla Shuj, Tama Shavania, Lamatin Govi Tos Cholaya, Lord Tanyang Tolaya, some town to Wena, Yayores. Lamatan, then Mugu Chulaya, and Lord Drovina, Sozula Kayores. Also, there are some references that you find sometimes in scriptures. Like, for example, Lama Tsongkhapa in the Insight chapter says that this is the type of mind or the type of attitude that you should take. What he indicated was that there are certain things that you might not understand fully, that you will not realize fully. And yet, in terms of choosing which position to take, then it's better to take this position rather than not take any position. Like, for example, in terms of relying upon a spiritual teacher, while the teachings on how to do it were explained in detail, it might be that one will not understand them fully. So even if you don't understand them fully, or if you don't get fully the teaching of the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, it's still better to take on the attitude of relying upon a spiritual teacher than thinking that since I don't get all the points, then it's better for me not to follow any spiritual teacher whatsoever.
But aside from that, Geshe said that himself is not very skilled in life stories or biographies and so forth. So he doesn't know much about them. He cannot share much about them.
That did Tandang Jovi Chutugi, the mountain king Rosra, in a Jovi Chutugi, Nanga Church, that Negan Chedor Chella, Kosun to get Tentam Seti, Negan Chedor Chagoyagi, Gunzin Jigoras, dear Shingoy.
So, in going back to the preparation to the meditation session, the first point in the 6 preparatory practices is cleaning your dwelling and setting up representations of body, speech, and mind. So it's likely that many of you have heard about it, many of you know what to do, but still it's important to make sure that we do everything right, that we prepare the meditation place in the correct way and cleaning it up and setting representations of body, speech, and mind.
The Negan Chedor Chagoyagi, so the Manzuta, and the Camru Singi Gongoras. Ani Camru, Ani Camru Chelia, Ani Kavu Salta Gogoras, Kavu Salta Sagi, Kavu Dendishusagi, Neda Masona, Ani Susu Negan di Chaguanza, di Ani Chick Toma Delia, Ani Salmatako, Ani Negan di Pig, Ani Chedor Yapu Checheni. The
point is that in our meditation session, we will begin with going for refuge and developing bodhicitta. So in going for refuge, we invite the objects of refuge to our meditation space, to the room. Since we are going to invite the objects of refuge to the room, it's important to make proper presentation, proper arrangement, to keep it clean and tidy.
Diri dinza jig pigita negan di chedanda penata jig nusho lomba doina and kamba di manche zama do jig the yoros that jig pigi kining jamu da neva dindi yoro the ina ya jig anen thamata charala soba jig dindi chuma tsuzu yabaina and deso zama sogo ya kecham chagores.
Now here it seems that people's dwelling are quite clean. You know, we keep our house clean. You might find other places where, you know, normally, generally speaking, the living conditions are not that clean, but here they're quite clean. But still, if your room is affected by either smells of cigarettes, alcohol, or what have you, it's better to make sure that, first of all, where you're going to meditate, that the place is kept clean. Otherwise, if you still have sense of alcohol in your room where you're going to meditate, and you invite the objects of refuge to come to your meditation, it might be that they themselves become intoxicated. Yeah. And if the objects of refuge become intoxicated, you know, what kind of blessings you're going to get is quite doubtful. Maybe you're going to get a mix of confused blessings. Anyway, of course, Chuck was only joking. When you invite an important person to come and visit you, you clean your house or you arrange it in a nice way. It's exactly in the same way.
사실 계시슈 되려야 슈슈 거야디 백히신 우차고 그랬어. 먼저 통 가주스여나 아니 배나 메저는 가주스 통 친구에는 주고 아니야 대서 야같이 시작으로 왔어.
So you're going to do a meditation session and you invite the objects of refuge to begin with to the meditation session. So if you invite an important guest to your house, it's not that you're going to house them in the worst possible part of the house. You're going to give them a good seat. You're going to invite them into the better part of the house. So also here, when you choose a place for your meditation session, don't choose and you invite or you arrange those representations of body, speech, and mind. Don't choose the least functional or the worst part of your house. Choose a good place.
Then Jumba kitchen, Buji, Chesology, Dushi Shama Tovaina, Ani, and Kavi Resena.
And if you don't take the mental attitude in which you are inviting them like guests to participate in your meditation session, then your relationship with the objects of refuge, or the way that you relate to them, would also be just to that degree. They are not even guests.
Dire pinza takanji pigi tebada tamanda ani kuzi kaju ski yemedi ani namji sozu ani kozontugi ani ten tambanda ani tamsagi sajala sobotena peshi sosugi ani gyudi ani shudachi tuya dochi chagores ro kaju sigi ani tongda tebad tiyobana tuchuski ani tsachim zingores dinza tas ani ngaranzugi ani tebatamanggi kajusugi ani shuyemedi tigunding tagwachi sochi tiredasra.
And you can get a sense of how much faith in that sense of clarity, lucidity you have with respect to the objects of refuge when you look at the arrangement that you create or that you have created in your house. If it's quite messy, if it is quite poor, then that could be also indicative of what is your connection, what is the type of relationship, of the way of relying upon these objects of refuge. Whereas if it is imbued with faith, with that lucidity, it is likely that also the arrangement that you create, those representation of body, speech, and mind, and the offering and so forth, will be also done accordingly. So sometimes if you just want to assess what is your way of relating to those objects of refuge, this is something that you can check. This is something that you can assess.
That tebatama tetsam mevalaya chendab chimbu jugus lavaina hamba chagores ra di yonga yomar tebatama kajus gishuk cheva di chugi ani chendab miwa di takuchungi chagores.
If you have no faith, no clarity whatsoever, and you're still expecting to receive blessings from what you do, you're being too full on about your expectation. Whereas if you do have faith and trust, if you have that sense of clarity, commensurate with the degree of your faith and clarity will be the degree of blessings that you will receive.
That ani kozon to gitem tam saidi kozon to gitem tam saidi da pena da lamram penata manju lamram chen jin chung kari and lamram nyam ching jing by na ani ku tendelaya ani da dire da kaso da choji diawase da jibe tamji gita ani kozon to sun chig dune ani pen da min namachen chomba ani gyabtunga bi kundata wichi and ku tendelaya goviores and di to gitendelaya da lamram ani chenji chonsum ro ani songi tenaya di ani to gitenaya ta pigi ani peshi yakshudi tanga namgi chobigi ani chaze ani pena dojitivita di ani yakshuchi songdos ro dindiji yobana ta disumdi ani kosuntu giten chungol ta ditsu ani dendeshi college ni shuguen tele shuchu.
So after saying, cling your dwellings and arrange representations of the exalted body, speech, and mind, then the arrangement of the representations of body, speech, and mind can be done in a contextual way. Like, for example, if what you're preparing for is a place for meditating on the states of the path of enlightenment, that is going to be your practice, then you arrange representations of body, speech, and mind in the following possible way. So in terms of representation of body, you can arrange for a statue or an image of Lama Tsongkhapa, who condenses all the enlightened qualities of body, speech, and mind appearing in the form of human being. So that would be a representation of body. A representation of speech would be, for example, a text containing the teachings from the three extents of the states of the path of enlightenment: the extensive, the medium, and the abridged. In terms of arranging a representation of mind, you can arrange, for example, something that we use as a substance of mudra, a vajra and bell.
Pena doji tibudi chundin di tabshin chungoros. Inza ani tugi pigi ta nyamning zo di ani tabshin teros. Tin chundin ta doji tibi yabaina ani tan donga ni gi pigi ani nyamning di ani dele changores. Ro.
Vajra and bell for us represent method and wisdom. The method and wisdom are qualities of mind, which what you need to have in order to have an excellent practice of sutra and mantra.
Dile da chidangi pigi nanzata sanjibi chabajiki ani kosuntu tendi and so ta kute ani sanji chamden digita ani kuchik and song tenaya ta chona ani kajendi tusam Geshe ani kangi chanzang 대달 마저는 예비돼서 대달 마저는 예동바 대달 마저는 시름님부터 오식 아니 송 때려야 나려나 야고 빼러왔어 아니 두기 때는 단지 시원 마저 도지 주디여나 안 당연히 전된데 차가서 어딘지 즉 인지미 고고서레스.
But also looking at the way of arranging representations of body, speech, and mind in general. So a general arrangement for practice would be a representation of body would be a statue and image of the Lord of the teaching, the Buddha. A representation of speech would be texts that contain the teachings of the Buddha. So if you can do that extensively, you might have a whole set, complete set of the Kangyur teachings, the volumes of all the teachings that the Buddha gave. But if you cannot have that, then you can have texts that contain the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. You have extensive presentation of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, or the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra taught in 8,000 verses. So you can say that if you cannot get that, at the very least, you can keep a copy of the Heart Sutra. And representation of the mind can be taken to be, again, just like before, Vajra and Bell, which symbolize method and wisdom across the systems of Sutra and Tantra. So Alan has sent a question here. Let's read it out. It says, as I understand, the offering practice is the best thing to offer the Guru. However, in relation to Atisha, one of his students was a meditator who has taken teachings and had been meditating for years, but he did not get anywhere near the realizations of the cook who had not had any time at all to meditate on anything. So it seems offering service to the Guru is better than offering practice in terms of meditation, etc. Could Geshe please clarify this? Dila Geshe lama la chuba piwa inarwa. Ani kashin chuba piwa ina chuba yakshuresne chik lagerwa. Ine Atisha George ginamta di tewa ina logi chi yoresa. Ta dila logi dila khala yoresena. Ji George la geto minda yores chik nyamlen pa di gomba dende nyamlen yabochi inayan dende ine tokba dende mixe keyo mares. 아니 디민바 콜라 마친 칼라스한테 열어서 냠네 로존 가게 많이 바지네 내가 야다 양다고 쳐버렸어. 그 냠네 똑바된데 지 개발해서 디테와이나 할람 라마 템바스나 산신 야메나디 셴바된데 피와이나 카우카블라 산신스나 라마라
칼라야고 제가
칼라야고야 샵치야고 쳐와이나 샵치야고 쳐와이나 아니 까신 도발레 공 냠네 쳐발레 된데 야가된데 지요레스 그냥 삼나스
디 조직 남들 나물이야 다가 야원 점점바 아니 부초와 공바와 생기 아니 너무숨 용스타브 너무숨 이어와스 이자 아니 공바와디 아니 조직이다 아니 공바와 냐디기 아니 공바와기 피기게 가정이만 지쉬바 권한기 때 지 조선 용수 저바 아디샤기 땅난지 권한 빼디 그 배쳤다 공기했다 그러면도 내가 제거해서 말어 맞지 그도 되고 그랬어 아니 부숑한디 아니 샤브도 슈 아니 냠도 아니 로종치 아니 점점비 아니 그 따진 겐레 용수 저거디 아디샤기 따지 샤브도 용수 저거디 점점비 쉬고 그랬어 디치디기 타마들이야 콘송 나니 또한 토슈디 야원 점tomba curvaries.
And the life story of Atisha, it was said that he had three main students: Jomtomba, Gyawa Jomtomba, Puchungwa, and Gombawa. So Gombawa didn't have to do anything apart from meditation. In that sense, the task or the work that he was assigned by Atisha was just to focus on meditation, on practice. Then the second student, Puchua, he was on the side, he was given also some teachings, he was assigned to study and also do some practice. And then there was the main guide that was in charge of all the rest, the upkeeping, all the administration and so forth. That was Gyawa Jomtomba. He reached the highest level of realizations amongst the three.
Tadi 균생 딘디송거스 단다 아니 Gyawa Jomtomba 야 신심 시비문시였어. 아니 공기 아니 부숑와기 삼발이야 따지 내가 몸부슈 체고도 아니 공기야리 lov니체 두즈 촐라도 상상르치 부숑 삼레 딘디송거스 아니 Gyawa Jomtombe 냠스 란치네 안다 집에서다야다 공개 주점도 주점은 사주다 딘딜라이서라 라르사 부숑와 아니 이내야나 아니 가서 영전 된비 나 가시디 남이샤도시에 딘스 송레사 간지 영전 tom버디 라마레에 대구체슈 임비 균진지 아니 탈 또버 토슈지 차비 로기 딘디송도스 간지
So it was said that Jomtomba had clairvoyance that was able to see other people's mind. So he was able to see the mind of Puchungwa. So he saw that Puchungwa was a bit disgruntled in a sense that he was thinking that I want to study, I want to do meditation, the other things that I need to do take away the time for my study and meditation. So I still need to do some work, I still have some jobs, and it wastes the time that I could have spent in meditating and studying. So one day, Jomtomba approached him and had a conversation with him about it. He said that, so you think that the other admin work that you need to do is taking away the time that you could have spent in studying and meditation? And Puchungwa admitted that. He said, yeah, this is the case. Whereas Jomtomba took the attitude of attending to his teacher's jobs or needs and so forth wholeheartedly. And he said that I'm happy to do whatever delights the heart of my master. So it was said that with that sense of complete sense of faith and trust, having developed that complete or a full sense of faith and trust in his master, that was a thing that was that has facilitated the development of high level of realization.
Dere ganji ina yang zo di kashin tribi chebe ramni nese angazu yons tawaras di zo yin gogores kansina ani ngoni lama senden jena ani toma di pigile ya ani nyamne yago chiyon ya langdor ne yago ji xian chedu ani sozu lama checheni lama di kyongyo yoras dinza din nanshi jongin di ani lama dige ani ya tu nishu di chago gores kedi di chag mebaina ani lama di kensawo and chaya ninga yores ro ina ya pigi kashin juna ya pigi tegudi tachi sangile ya tegu yoba nanshin lama le tegudi mena kajuzi gi joba nyamne chene ya gyul tobi yonde kiadi kabu imbadi namde ditone tengoros ra.
But still you find in teachings the statement that the best type of offering that you can make is offering a practice that accords with the instructions that you get. So this is still found in different teachings. The most important offering that you can make is your own practice. And it needs to be that. Otherwise, if that would not be the most important thing to do, to practice in a way that accords with the instructions that you get from the teacher, we would have ended in a really awkward situation of not really having to practice what the Lama says. So still, the most important thing to do is to follow those teachings. And this is the reason, the main reason for following a spiritual teacher is so that we can develop our practice. And in order to develop a practice well, we need to have a sense of devotion in our mind to the spiritual teacher, a sense of devotion in the sense that we need to have respect and a high sense of esteem in the spiritual teacher. And if you do that, that will bring about a spiritual development. Whereas if you don't have that sense of devotion, in the sense that if you don't have trust and faith and respect and esteem in the spiritual teacher, your spiritual development will be quite limited, as indicated in biographies such as this.
Odili dakanji nganzu tuzumlomni gom nyamjo kari chigi yobadi rangula ya tobi yonde gibi chedu rewas tinza tobi yonde gi gono ani debadan thamsi gogores deba thamsi kaju shuche odi chogi ani tobi yonde gi yobadi jasa jata bares nganzu namji shode deba pundu matel kebase soma nashingi odi chagores.
And in order for qualities of realizations to rise in our mind, we need to have faith and samaya bonds with our teachers. Through that, qualities of realizations will arise. As it was said in some text, faith is like a mother that gives birth to all positive qualities.
Karme sava yina ta tsu dende shun tamye tere dos that di ani suzu nangla la yo shimba jimba ina ani nima tagba ani shogi pigile ya zaman suetini ani chi chobo tuzu pinita ani suzu le ya kuson tu ten khali ya ba de pigi gi chi ani gibje tola madeba ani chi yawtsunga bigi ani kujiyo na yawtsunga ba kungwe shu yo sambi toni pigile ya jinga shu ani chawan shu ani nima tabala ya tembe kujian dhanasi turi samdan ani nima tabala ya ro ngina yeso nga gi yeso zongi shaja mayba ani suzuti ani kozontu dile ya drone ani jega shu so tabgo ya di ani kozontu gi tentam zonan kichi shu chagores.
Anyway, one more thing that Geshe wanted to say with respect to cleaning your dwelling and setting up representations of body, speech, and mind. When it says you should clean the dwellings and arrange representations of the exalted body, speech, and mind, if you arrange for a new meditation place and you a place that hasn't existed before, then you need to bring in those representations of body, speech, and mind and arrange them in a particular way. But for many of us, we have our own usual place of meditation in a house. So it's not that every day you need to bring things in you to that room. So if you, for example, have already a statue of Lama Tsongkhapa in that room where you're going to meditate, then as you enter the room, you need to think that I'm again inviting Lama Tsongkhapa to reside in my place of meditation. I'm receiving the blessings of Lama Tsongkhapa today. I'm making supplication to Lama Tsongkhapa today as he's present here in actuality. So rather than becoming quite familiar with this representation of body, speech, and mind with the statues and so forth that we have with an altar and take them for granted, still, whenever we enter that room or the place of meditation, again, we should think that I'm inviting them to participate or to be there in my place of meditation. I'm going to, again, host Lama Tsongkhapa. I'm going to receive his blessing. So it's really important to still make sure that we develop that mental attitude. In recent teachings that His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave online, he referred to an Avalokiteshvara statue in his room, and he says that every day the facial expression of the statue changes. Now, of course, His Holiness doesn't have any reason to just make up the story. So it's important to have that single-pointed faith in your heart. And if you if you kindle that single-pointed faith in your heart, it is possible that also one day it will happen to you, that the facial expression of the statue will also change in relation to you. It is possible through single-pointed faith.
Krishna, there's one time Geshe has said to Serena, practice is the most important, because sometimes I go to volunteer center on a basis, but Geshe told me practice is the most essential for daily. In this case, the practice means do what?
Practice means?
Means what we do.
Okay. Dila bagachila Quran la keche shudi nyamnenche keche shudes de la sonsa. Chezande tola sanutan wa ina ro Quran sanzan dinde kunda shansala dogere sanzan chuzo shembala dinde chi ropa chega dogere dinde chi kadila Qurangi kola nyamlen chadi keche shudes dinde chi labwa. Is an nyamnen keche shuresia de la nyamnen de la quea karet jagius.
There's the Nyamgoya Kari, Langoya Kari, Tikoya Rasro.
No.
And the Nyamgoya di Nanzu Julia Chapu Shuju Yugi, Chadamoson, Nanzinti, di Nyamgores. Langoya di any Chamba Ninji, any share of the sober, the Lango does. That di Lambalaya, Kunda Shaman Chibuchiki, Yungumadas, and volunteer Chibuchiki, Yungumadas.
The word for practice in Tibetan is nyamlen. So there are two syllables to that word, nyam and len. This is what practice is in Tibetan. So the first syllable, nyam, means bringing to decline or bringing a sense of deterioration. So what do we want to destroy? Or what do we want to undermine? It is unafflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and so forth. That's one part of our practice, to bring those afflictive states of mind down. the second syllable within the word for practice is len, which means to take up. What are the things that we want to take up? We want to take love and compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. So our practice consists of those two elements. It is bringing our afflictions down and taking up those positive qualities, love, compassion, and so forth. So then in order to do that, first off, the first step is to gain some knowledge. We study and then we apply that to a practice so that we can fulfill those two aspects of the word nyamlen, to bring down our afflictions and to develop those good states of mind. So it is possible that we that we go to the art studio to create statues and so forth, or that we offer service in different places, and it's good. But then we still need to make sure that we fulfill those elements of practice, that we bring our afflictions down, and we also develop those positive qualities. And in order to do that, then first of all, we need to study in order to know how to do that. And then we follow it up by taking actions in order to bring our afflictions down and to develop those good qualities.
지단 가리는 기침부터 랑안주기 소사드장 카만더 뼈망부여로스 차세야 기침부리 멘다사야 기침부리 군다샤야 기침부리 생아다야 기침부리 다 기침부 잔자로스 이는야 기침부 난기 기침부치 and so the 가르에스 라운드 디 living in sondia tembe tamji namni de long the top tani tenzin chebo majibo driba chebo khona se di tola rogo de ani shemba tu zu tsabe kechembo re de ne ya ku tösa tönjo chin rogo das kawgola nga dini do sangu du se nganzu lama soboru mu chigi kharin di kechembo res ro ine ya kawgola ya chi doja su ya khansomba dili laga ji ani yo mari sam dewaina ani 삼장한지 충동인도 책도스 저 아니 조디 비게 롬예게치 디 쇼레야 소사트janti 양라스라와 나신 아니 양라든 진투바나 안간지야 안 도도치 아니 나르 감비가라 란투에치 용사로스로.
So we have that meaning of practice, and in order for our practice to succeed, we have different elements that we combine together that gather the accumulations and purify negativities and obscurations, and they're also very important. So in order to do that, we do different things. We do prostrations, we offer mandala offerings, we do some recitation of mantras and so forth. So making prostration is important, making mandala offering is important, reciting mantras is important. But then when you look at the many different things that we do in order to accumulate the collections and purify negativity and obscurations, you end up with a really big list of things that are really important. And then you need then to think, well, what do I do? What is important? So not only that, also when you receive teachings or advice from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it says many different things. This is important, and this is important, and this is important, and the other thing is important. And then you end up thinking that there's so many things that are important, so what then do I need to do? Well, some people think that, sometimes when Lama Zopa Rinpoche says that this is the most important, this is very important, it says that to a particular student. So then saying that to a particular student, we think that therefore there's nothing that is more important than that. This is what I should do. But then Geshe feels that when you think about it in the great scheme of things, in the meaning of practice, in drawing also from what Vasubandhu said in his Treasure of Knowledge, he said with respect to, he cited a statement with respect to the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha's teachings are of twofold. There are teachings as scriptures and teachings as realizations. So then we develop those teachings. The teachings are to be retained in one's mind, and the teachings are to be upheld in one's mind through realization. So then you come across those different practices. All of them are said to be important. But then we think of how does it fit within those teachings as scriptures and teachings as realizations. First of all, the first step would be to study the teachings as scriptures, and then to develop them in one's mind stream as realizations. So if you then think about this mode of progress with teachings, study these teachings and develop them in realizations, you understand that also that there are many other branches to that. There are those things that we do for purification and purification of obscuration and accumulating the collections and so forth. And all of them are called limbs. They're called limbs or arms in that we are supported by them or on them so that we can rise up in the same way that the body is supported on the legs or the arms in order to rise up from the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's do some dedication prayers. Adinyo Duda Lama Sangye Dugule Doa Chikyama Lupa De Salagopa Shuju Sanchorin Poche Make Pana Kegyu Kepanya Bame Pani Gole Gondo Pewash Kowe Shinkamde Dendande Wama Luju Wene Chenze Ziwante Zimya Soi Shape Site Badu Tengyo Jangwe Gawe Ten Zikyo Dewe Kubutu Poti Losong Kowe Lemon Kutu Chanso Duji Kandu Shate Sho.
Thank you.
No.
Sana. You pick your khaki.